Hello, good morning. My name is Valentine, and just like you, I was also a student of Akin's class. I think we finished our own class last year. Now, I decided to make this video after having some discussions with Akin, and I hope that some of the things that I may have to say here, might encourage some of you. We all know the frustrations of, having to apply for jobs time and time again. And then we get those notes or emails that say, oh, at this point, we're not going to be going ahead with you. We found someone else whose skills, blah, blah, blah. It's frustrating. It's very frustrating. Absolutely so. But that, of course, is not a reason why we wouldn't continue trying. I mean, if you needed something or you want something, then I guess your desire can only be measured through the amount of efforts you put in trying to get that thing. So maybe if I give you a little bit of my own story, hopefully it might encourage you. I came to the US in 2020. I mean, that was my first visit. I've been coming here, but only, with my family for holidays. I came here in 2020 because I was diagnosed with stage 4 terminal cancer. When I got the diagnosis in Nigeria, it was, of course, as you expect, a very terrible blow. I've worked with NAFDAC for 22 years. I was an assistant director in NAFDAC. So obviously my core skill sets will be very limited. I'm a professional in food safety, in regulatory compliance, and GMP, those type of things, regulations and food, drugs, chemicals, water, the equivalent of FDA here. That's the only thing I ever did in my life. And I was obviously getting to the top of my career at that time. So when I was diagnosed with cancer and I came here in 2020, unfortunately they had wasted so much time in Nigeria, they couldn't make a diagnosis. And then when I got here, they said it was stage 4. I had lost more than half of my weight. I wasn't able to even sit down. I couldn't, if you laid me down, I remained in that position until you turned me. They didn't even treat me for 57 days because they felt my blood, I had transfusions. They just felt that my system was such a bad state that if they treated me, the chemo or the chemicals would kill me. So they left me for almost 2 months of that treatment. And the pain of cancer, everything you've ever been told about it is a lie. Cancer is worse than the worst thing you've ever been told about it. But eventually the doctors agreed to start the treatment, and by and by I got better. Now, whether you believe in a miracle or not, people don't generally come back from stage 4 cancer, but it happened to me. Praise God. I appreciate God for that. Now, if I had to apply for a job now to work with the FDA, I will need some certain level of clearance, security clearance and all that stuff, which I didn't have then because I only came here as a tourist. But I decided to take a look at the things that were available to me and say, okay, so what other, career paths could I take that would probably bridge in very quickly for me to be able to, go on with my life. Because I was already here now for 2 years and NAFDAC had stopped paying me. I had to drop my papers. I had to resign so that I don't get sacked. So someone introduced me to Akin and said, you could just try this IT cybersecurity thing. So I joined the class where I met a lot of smart people, a lot of people who, were putting their right foot forward all the time. And then we finished the class. That was the first time in my whole life, I'm over 50, that I've ever been introduced to IT, cybersecurity, GRC. Never known about it before. That was the first time. That was the first time I ever got introduced to it. And like most of you, we went about writing our resume and applying. I applied for dozens and dozens of jobs, but most of them went like that. No one got back to me. So my wife used to say, looking for a job in America is a job by itself, and I'll agree with her. But I did have a few, 1 or 2 interviews, mostly on IT audit. I think it's probably easier to get an IT audit job than other facets of cybersecurity. And, so I went and I did some of those interviews. As a matter of fact, in 3 instances, I got up to the 4th level. So with Citibank, I did the first, second, third interview, and with Wells Fargo twice. And both times they got back to me saying, "Oh, we're sorry, we cannot continue." Till I found out that the resume I had submitted to these organizations was incongruous. It was not entirely with what was in my LinkedIn. I hadn't checked my LinkedIn for over 1 year. So what was reflected in my LinkedIn was my history as a regulator in Nigeria, which probably didn't go in tandem. So I had to hibernate and in fact delete my LinkedIn profile and recreated another one which was more in tandem with the resume I was so I was so grateful that I was able to get jobs with KPMG and with Wells Fargo, and it wasn't magic. It wasn't magic. There are a few probably tips that I hope might work for you. First one is you have to make sure that your LinkedIn is well done, and it is also in tandem with whatever resume you have there. Some organizations will never employ you till they check your LinkedIn. That's number one. Number two, your resume has to be good. You need to have a good resume that is at the same time robust as it is dynamic. In other words, it will be able to fit different types of roles. Now, the problem of having 10 different resumes is you get confused sometimes. Which one did I send to these people? Which one? And then I know I've experienced that before. I applied for a certain role, but as it turned out, the resume I had submitted to them was different from the one I was reading when I was doing the interview. So you can imagine the embarrassment that came with it. So just make kind of a dynamic and robust. And then the second one, the interviews. It's absolutely important. Now, remember, the only thing they know about you is what you tell them during the interview. That's all. It's marketing, you selling yourself. Grammar is absolutely important. It's absolutely important. I told my kids something. I said, Julius Caesar was killed March 15, 44 BC. Thousands of people have written the story of how he got murdered, how he was killed. But when Shakespeare wrote his own version in the 15th century, it was so beautifully written that it has now become like the official narrative of the murder of Julius Caesar. But that he wasn't the only guy that wrote it, but it was how he wrote it. I mean, some of you must have read Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment or Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace. It's not so much about the stories, it's how the stories were written. You write something in a very elegant and captivating manner. The person you're talking to or the person reading it does not forget. It's important that you get your grammar very well and you're able to express yourself properly. That does not mean to speak with an American accent. Everyone has their own accent. Speak with your own accent, but just be eloquent and try to make little or no grammatical error. It's important. Never ever stutter or show signs of lack of confidence. For instance, you go for a visa interview to get a US visa. So they say, so when is your birthday? And then you go, when is my birthday? You're not going to get the visa. Or they ask you, how would you approach problem XYZ? And then you go, thank you very much for that question. How I will approach problem XYZ, you're not going to get the job. You have to be fluent. It's important. I mean, you all know President Obama, right? You just have to be able to say something so elegantly that everyone is captivated. Maybe by the time they get to their house, they realize you've said nothing. But when you were saying it, it sounded beautiful. So you have to learn that. You have to learn that. You have to learn to be able to sound very articulate. It's important. During interviews, they listen to you more than you talk. You probably don't know. They listen to you more than you talk. And all those little things, particularly when you have to meet board members, matter. How you articulate yourself. Do not repeat the questions that they ask you. Answer it. And then number two, when they ask you questions about things that are not in your resume, don't play smart by trying to kind of like fabricate an answer. The ostensible reason is that I want to show that I'm capable. But the truthful thing is, you would say, ma'am or sir, I don't think that is in my resume. I don't think I made a claim of having competence in that particular skill. That is also honesty. Maybe they knew, but they just wanted to try you out. So you just tell it to them. You said, that's just not it. Never sound desperate too. When I did my interviews, every time I did my interviews, I felt that I was kind of like leading the way, the path that the interview took. But you do that in such a subtle way so that you don't sound like a smart aleck. Nobody likes a smart aleck. And I was so fortunate that I was able to get 2 jobs with KPMG and with Wells Fargo. And they were both extremely fantastic jobs. It can happen to you. 1, like I said, your LinkedIn. 2, you should write a very robust and dynamic resume that captures everything. Do not use big grammar or make claims that you cannot defend. And then number 3, during the interview itself, be assertive with your grammar. Assertive doesn't mean rude. It just means speak flawlessly. Weave your words so that it sounds like a poem. They like it like that. That's the only, you're not taking an exam. They're only asking you to prove to them that if they take you, you're going to add value to the organization. Another thing I see people trying to read for exams and they're trying to say, what are the controls of ISO 27001? What are the controls for NIST 500 and 853? No one is going to ask you that. I've been with KPMG now for how many months? I don't even know which framework that we are marked it to, because basically the controls are basically the same. They're all the same. And since it is not academic, they're not going to tell you, go and tell me the 14 controls in 27. No, they're all practical questions they're going to ask you for real life scenarios. And now, what the best thing you're going to do to prepare for an interview is to know what the role is. Look for practical examples of things that could happen in that role, and then make yourself acquainted with it. Not to go and start reading CIA, respond, identified. Nobody's going to ask you that. If they're going to ask you that, they're going to ask you in a practical context. And that's what you have to learn. They ask you, okay, in a situation that so and so happens, what are you going to do? Can you tell us a situation where this is occurred and what you did? And that's where that star thing that I can give us is important. Identifying the problem, remediating the problem, and then seeing that the remediation has an outcome which can also be reported. And remember, any role you do, whether it's GRC, cybersecurity, IT audit, you're going to write a report. The company or the people that are interviewing you want you to write a report that is succinct, yet captures everything. They don't want you to tell a long story, like you're right. No, it has to be succinct, and therefore you should be able to, use the fewest words to be able to give out the largest amount of clarity using the fewest number of words. That's how a fine report should look like. Your report should be very brief and to the point. But if you are verbose during interviews, repeating the same thing over and over, so like I said earlier, as I told you before, but though they have probably 100 other people that they're trying to interview with. So continue to apply. Continue to apply. My wife continued to apply and apply. She got offered a job on the 18th of last month. The very next day, 19th of the very next day, they gave her another offer. The 2 jobs, each of them was over six figures. 6 figures in 2 days. 2 jobs, 6 figures in 2 days. Because she just wasn't going to give up. She kept on doing and doing and doing. And the same thing with me. I just didn't stop. I didn't stop. Regardless of the fact that I have these jobs. Right now, I'm still applying. Because what is it all about? It's all about developing your career and then knowing where it suits you best. Aki is teaching us or teaching you guys a lot of things. He doesn't expect you to go deep into all these things, but he expects you to choose one thing that your nature, that your set skills, that you naturally gravitate to. If it is GRC, if it's cybersecurity, if it's IT audit, you will know the ones you're most comfortable with. And so if you get a role or a job that pays well, but you feel it is not the kind of job you want to do, you continue to apply for the ones that you want to do. And when they ask you how much do you want, you tell them a wide range. That is, I'll give an example. There was an interview recently I did for a principal role in a company called Palo Alto. It pays 180 to 220,000. So during the interview, this was just last week, she said to me, even though you have an idea of what it is, but your years of experience is not enough to qualify you for the principal role. Would you consider a senior role? And I said, okay, I would consider a senior role, but if we can agree on the remuneration, on the pay. And she says, what are you looking at? I said, I'm looking at 140 to 180. She said, yeah, that will do. That's what the company is paying for that role. So I became very flexible. So since I cannot do the principal job or the manager role, which pays 180 to 220, 140 to 180 is not bad at all. I mean, you could do that for a year or two and then jump from there and get another one. But just keep on studying, keep on talking to people who have those roles, who are really working in those particular roles. Update yourself by doing research online, work on your resume, work on your confidence, and like I said, on your grammar too. Thank you.